Ma'am, that's not real medicine. The words sliced through the boarding noise like a blade. Flight attendant Clara Whitman yanked the blue inhaler from 16-year-old Aisha Okafor's trembling hands. Skybridge Airways, Flight 9. 21 sat still at the gate in Chicago. The cabin suddenly hushed and heavy. Aisha froze, lungs locking like fists. "Please," she gasped. "That's my inhaler." Clara lifted it like contraband. "Street drugs on a plane," she said loudly. Passengers in first class glanced over, curiosity flickering into judgment. Aisha held up her medical ID bracelet. "It's prescribed," she wheezed. Clara didn't look. "Fake jewelry," she muttered. 3 rows back, travel vlogger Leah Tran lifted her phone. "You're watching an airline incident in real time," she whispered. The camera caught the terror in Aisha's face, the cold control on Clara's. "Where'd you get this, sweetheart?" Clara asked. "Your dealer?" The insult hit harder than the lack of air. Aisha reached for the inhaler, but Clara stepped back. "Hands where I can see them." Phones rose. No one moved. The sound of Aisha's breathing filled the cabin, ragged and uneven. Her phone buzzed. "Dad!" She tried to answer, but her lungs refused. The call dropped to voicemail. Leah whispered, "This is medical discrimination." Comments poured into her stream. "Help her. Call a doctor." Hashtags began spreading. "Let her breathe." "Justice for Aisha." Clara ignored the tension. "Rules exist for a reason," she said. "Either this goes in the trash or you get off my plane." Aisha bent forward, gasping. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Across the aisle, Dr. Omar Nazari, a retired internist, stood. "She's having an asthma attack," he said. "She needs that inhaler now." "Sit down, sir," Clara snapped. "Crew safety comes first." Leah's camera caught his disbelief. "They're refusing a doctor," she whispered. Aisha's phone buzzed again, Dad calling. Her shaking fingers reached for it. "Dad!" "Please!" she rasped. At the front, the intercom crackled. "Flight attendants, prepare for door closure." Clara looked at the clock. "You're holding up departure." Rita Coleman, the gate supervisor, stepped aboard after a report from ground staff. "What's happening?" "Passenger with suspicious medication," Clara said. "Claims asthma." Rita's eyes went to Aisha, pale, trembling, lips faintly blue. "She's not faking," Rita said quietly. 12 years on the job," Clara replied stiffly. "I know what I'm seeing." Leah's live stream hit 10,000 viewers. Outrage spread across the comments. Disability rights groups were tagged. Rita knelt beside Aisha. "Sweetheart, can you breathe?" Aisha shook her head weakly. "I need my inhaler." Rita turned to Clara. "Give it back. Without verification, it's against protocol." Aisha's phone buzzed again. Rita glanced at the caller ID, Captain Nathaniel Brooks. The name sounded familiar, though she couldn't place it. Aisha pressed the green icon, whispering into the phone. "Dad, they won't let me breathe." The response came through the speaker, deep, calm, commanding. "This is Captain Nathaniel Brooks, Chief of Flight Operations for Skybridge Airways. Who is preventing my daughter from using her prescribed medication?" Silence spread through the cabin. Passengers stared. Clara's face drained of color. Rita straightened, pulse quickening. "Sir, we're resolving it now." "Good," he said, "because I'll be at that door in 5 minutes." Clara finally looked at the inhaler in her hand, not as evidence, but as guilt. She knelt and handed it to Aisha. The girl pressed it to her lips. The soft hiss of medicine filled the quiet. Aisha inhaled, once, twice, slow, shaky, alive. Color returned to her cheeks. For a long moment, no one spoke. The cameras kept rolling. Leah's stream count soared past 20,000. Clara stood frozen, realizing the balance of power had shifted forever. On Flight 921, the sound of steady breathing was the only thing left that mattered. The cabin of Skybridge Airways. Flight 921 was frozen in silence. 16-year-old Aisha Okafor sat rigid in seat 22D, clutching her inhaler, her breath shaky but steady now. The humiliation lingered heavier than the recycled air. Around her, passengers whispered. Every phone still recorded. Everyone had heard the voice on the phone, the voice that belonged to Captain Nathaniel Brooks, Chief of Flight Operations, and Aisha's father. At the front, Clara Whitman stood motionless. Her crisp uniform now felt like armor that no longer fit. 12 years of service, gone in seconds. She could feel every eye on her, every breath of judgment. Gate Supervisor Rita Coleman spoke softly into her radio. "Passenger stable incident under review," she said, though her tone betrayed her nerves. Dr. Omar Nazari, the retired physician, turned toward Clara. "You nearly killed that girl," he said quietly. "Protocol doesn't mean cruelty." Clara didn't respond. Then came footsteps, measured, commanding, approaching through the jet bridge. Captain Nathaniel Brooks appeared, uniform immaculate, expression unreadable. He didn't look at the crew first, he went straight to his daughter. "Aisha," he said gently, "are you okay?" She nodded, tears welling. "I can breathe now." Brooks exhaled, then turned to Clara. "You're the one who confiscated her medication?" "Yes, sir," she said quickly. "I believed it was an unverified substance. I was following policy." Brooks's calm cut sharper than anger. "There's no policy that denies a child life-saving medicine. What you followed wasn't procedure, it was prejudice." Rita stepped forward carefully. "Captain, if we could debrief—" "We'll debrief here," he interrupted. His gaze swept the passengers. Every person on this plane saw an employee ignore a medical emergency because of an assumption. That ends tonight. Leah Tran's live stream zoomed in. The audience count leapt past 50,000. Clara's face paled under the camera lights. "Sir?" she stammered. "I didn't know she was your daughter." Brooks's reply was instant. "You shouldn't need my name to treat someone with decency." He turned to Dr. Nazari. "Doctor, how close was she?" "Minutes from collapsing," Nazari said. Brooks nodded grimly. "That's what I thought." He faced Rita. "Supervisor Coleman, this attendant is relieved of duty. Effective immediately. She'll be escorted off this aircraft." Clara's breath hitched. "Please, Captain, I made a mistake. You made a choice," he said evenly. "And you'll live with the consequences. Gate agents arrived." Brooks gestured toward them. "Escort her out." Clara moved down the aisle, every step slower than the last. Phones followed her like judgmental eyes. The humiliation she had inflicted now mirrored back at her. When the door sealed shut behind her, the quiet that followed felt almost sacred. Brooks turned to the crew. "This flight doesn't leave until every member understands medical protocol and ADA compliance. Human life outweighs paperwork." The purser nodded quickly. "Yes, Captain." Brooks knelt beside Aisha. "You handled this with strength," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." Aisha's voice wavered. "Everyone saw, Dad." "They needed to," he said. "The world has to see what accountability looks like." Leah's live stream caught father and daughter framed in the soft cabin light, her small hand holding the inhaler, his steady presence beside her. The caption read, "When justice boarded the plane." Outside, security cleared the jet bridge. Reporters were already gathering by the gate. Online, the story was exploding. Leather breathe, Captain Brooks, Sky Bridge accountability. Brooks stood tall, signaling to the crew. Close the door. Let's get these passengers home. Engines rumbled to life. Aisha exhaled, slow and sure. For the first time that night, her breathing felt free, not because the air had changed, but because the truth finally had. By morning, the video from Flight 921 had spread everywhere. News anchors replayed the clip of Aisha Okafor, gasping for breath, the calm authority of Captain Nathaniel Brooks, and the stunned silence that followed. By sunrise, Let Her Breathe had passed 1 million views. Inside Skybridge Airways headquarters, executives gathered in a sleek glass conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. The air was thick with dread. Captain Brooks stood at the head of the table, still in uniform, eyes shadowed from a sleepless night. "This isn't just a PR disaster," he said. "It's a moral failure." Across from him, Evelyn Pratt, Vice President of Communications, clasped her pen tightly. "Captain, we're trending globally. I recommend a statement and public apology. A press release won't stop the next one." Brooks cut in. "A child almost died on our plane because someone mistook arrogance for authority." The table went silent. Around him, executives shifted uncomfortably. At the far end sat Jules Park, a young systems engineer, fingers flying across his laptop. "Sir, I've been reviewing internal feedback logs. ADA compliance complaints doubled this year. Some involve medical device interference." "Show me," Brooks said. The projector filled with graphs, unresolved complaints, ignored alerts, growing neglect. Each number represented another passenger who hadn't been filmed. "This isn't one mistake," Brooks said grimly. "It's systemic." Evelyn frowned. "We can't rebuild our structure overnight. We have over 5,000 employees." "Then we start today," he said. Rita Coleman, the gate supervisor from the flight, joined via video link. "Sir, after you left, passengers applauded. They said they'd never seen accountability like that. But they also said they no longer trust us." Brooks nodded. "Then earning it back is our priority." He looked around the room. "Effective immediately, every flight attendant will complete 40 hours of emergency and de-escalation training. I also want a new system to flag verified medical conditions during booking." Jules spoke up. "I can integrate that. A mobile tool that connects passenger health data with crew tablets, a real-time alert system." Brooks's tone softened slightly. "Good. Call it Medical Alert. Prototype within 30 days. Evelyn hesitated. "That's a large investment. The board will need justification." Brooks met her eyes. "Justification? Watch that video again and tell me the cost of one child's breath." Silence filled the room. Elsewhere in the city, Clara Whitman sat alone in her apartment, uniform jacket folded beside her. The termination email glared from her laptop. Short, cold, final. She replayed the viral footage, her voice, her arrogance, the terror on that girl's face. The sound of her own words made her sick. For the first time in 12 years, she realized how blind she'd been to her own power. Across town, Aisha lay in bed, inhaler on the nightstand, scrolling through thousands of messages. Strangers called her brave. Parents called her an inspiration. One message stood out. "You reminded us that dignity isn't optional. It's a right." Her father's message came last. "Proud of you, sweetheart. This is only the beginning." That evening, Brooks sent an internal memo to every Skybridge employee. Subject: Emergency Reform Directive. It outlined the new medical training, ADA compliance updates, and the Medical Alert Initiative. The final line read, "One breath should never depend on someone else's bias." As snow fell over Chicago, Captain Brooks watched from his office window. Below, the city lights blurred through the white haze. He knew the storm he had started wasn't one the airline could escape, but maybe, just maybe, it was the one it needed to change. Morning slush churned along the curbs of Chicago, but inside Skybridge headquarters, momentum refused to thaw. The world now knew the name Aisha Okafor, and for once an airline had become a symbol of conscience instead of convenience. Captain Nathaniel Brooks had not left the building all night. His uniform jacket lay over a chair, sleeves rolled. On the conference room screen, the medical alert prototype glowed, an overnight mock-up built by Jules Park and a handful of sleepless engineers. "It syncs with passenger profiles," Jules said. "If a traveler registers a medical condition while booking, the system pings the crew tablet. No guesswork, no judgment." Brooks studied the flow diagram. Data privacy, encrypted end to end. HIPAA compliant. It only surfaces what matters in an emergency. "Good," Brooks said. "I want a test flight next month. Lives are not waiting for corporate permission." Across the table, Evelyn Pratt, Vice President of Communications, drafted remarks for a press briefing. "Captain, CNN, NBC, and the BBC want you live this afternoon." "Not yet," Brooks said. "Finish the reform before we parade it." "Silence may look defensive," Evelyn warned. "Action reads louder," he answered. "Results are the only language people trust." Across the city, Clara Whitman sat on her porch, watching reporters idle at the curb. The story had made her infamous. She had not slept. Aisha's face haunted every replay, and her own voice sounded crueler each time. Co-workers stopped replying. Even her mother's single call ended in a long, stunned quiet. Inside, unopened envelopes formed a small drift on the counter. Termination notice. Legal language. A letter from the ethics office requesting a formal apology. Clara stared at it, pen hovering, the weight of 12 years suddenly real. Meanwhile, in a sunlit bedroom, Aisha read letters from strangers. Some shared moments of humiliation. Others sent poems, prayers, and crayon drawings of planes with bright blue inhalers. On one envelope, someone had written, "You helped us breathe." Her inhaler rested beside her phone like a small, defiant lighthouse. Her best friend, Maya Lee, called. "You're trending again," she said. "They're calling you the girl who changed the skies." Aisha laughed softly. "I just didn't want to die on a plane." "Yeah," Maya said, "and now a lot of people won't." At noon, Skybridge streamed a press briefing. Evelyn faced the cameras with Brooks beside her. "This incident exposed flaws in our system," she said. "Effective immediately, Skybridge launches Safe Skies, focused on medical accessibility, crew training, and inclusion." Brooks added, "We are partnering with independent advisors to verify full ADA compliance. Every crew member will complete 40 hours of medical device recognition and de-escalation training. We are also deploying the Medical Alert app to provide real-time support for passengers in need." Reporters shouted questions. One asked whether the company feared lawsuits. "Fear does not change systems," Brooks said. "Accountability does." The clip went everywhere, but the tone had shifted. Headlines read, "Airline turns crisis into reform." Comment sections began to nod, wary but hopeful. Back on her porch, Clara watched the stream on her phone. Her throat tightened when Brooks appeared, no longer the man who ended her career, but a father trying to repair what her choices had broken. She picked up the ethics letter and finally began to write. That night, Aisha watched the briefing replay beside her father. When the medical alert logo filled the screen, she smiled. "You did it, Dad." He shook his head gently. "No, you did." Outside, sirens thinned into ordinary traffic, and the city lights trembled on wet pavement. The storm was passing, but its lesson lingered. One breath, honestly honored, can rebuild the sky. The Sky Bridge press conference sent shockwaves across the aviation world. Within hours, journalists were asking every airline in America how they handled medical emergencies and ADA compliance. For Captain Nathaniel Brooks, the attention brought no relief, only urgency. 3 days later, he stood inside the Sky Bridge training hangar near O'Hare, where rows of flight attendants sat facing a glowing projector screen. The words Safe Skies Initiative stretched across it in bold blue. On every desk, tablets displayed the new medical alert logo, a pulsing symbol shaped like a heartbeat. Brooks stepped forward, sleeves rolled up, exhaustion hiding behind control. "This training isn't punishment," he said. "It's protection, both for passengers and for you. Compassion isn't a trait. It's a discipline." Among the attendees sat Miguel Alvarez, a senior purser who had served beside Clara Whitman for years. He couldn't escape the memory of Flight 921, the fear, the silence, the moment he'd looked away. When Brooks's eyes met his, Miguel straightened his posture. After class, Brooks stopped him near the simulator. "You were there, weren't you?" Miguel nodded. "Yes, sir." I froze. I knew she was wrong, but she was senior crew. Brooks said quietly, "Then learn this lesson. Authority means nothing if it silences conscience." Meanwhile, at corporate headquarters, Evelyn Pratt coordinated a mountain of media requests, while Jules Park and his tech team finalized the medical alert beta. The app linked passenger profiles to verified medical data, sending immediate notifications to crew tablets during emergencies. "No hesitation," Jules said. "No guessing." Brooks approved the test launch. "Make it live on every domestic flight by next quarter." Human lives don't wait for budget approval. Across town, Aisha Okafor sat in a therapist's office. The counselor asked gently, "Do you feel safe flying again?" Aisha hesitated. "I want to, but sometimes I still hear her voice saying it's fake medicine." The counselor smiled softly. "Then, fly again. Let the sky know you reclaimed it." Elsewhere, Clara Whitman volunteered at a local shelter, folding sheets and serving soup under flickering fluorescent lights. She had mailed her written apology to Captain Brooks and Aisha a week earlier. Each morning she checked her inbox, hoping for a reply. None came. Still, the work grounded her. It was the first honest thing she'd done in years. At headquarters, Skybridge staged a live demonstration for regulators and journalists. A volunteer mimicked respiratory distress. Instantly, the crew tablet lit up. Passenger registered. Asthma. Medication cleared. The calm, alert tone filled the room. Applause followed. Evelyn leaned toward Brooks. "This is the story people will remember." Brooks didn't smile. "As long as they remember the reason it exists." That evening, father and daughter watched the demo replay at home. The blue medical alert symbol pulsed on the television. "It's strange," Aisha whispered. "Something that almost killed me is now saving others." Brooks squeezed her shoulder. "Sometimes change costs pain, but it's worth the price." Later that night, he opened his inbox. One new message blinked. From Clara Whitman. Subject, apology. Her words were simple. "I saw what you built. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm grateful that my failure became someone else's safety. Brooks read the note twice, then forwarded it to Aisha. She didn't reply immediately. Hours later, he passed her room and saw her asleep at her desk. The email glowed faintly on her laptop, with a single sentence typed beneath it. Forgiveness is how we breathe again. Outside, the Chicago skyline shimmered against melting snow. The storm had ended, but its echo remained, a reminder that one mistake, if faced with courage, could reshape an entire sky. Winter sunlight poured over Chicago as the first official Safe Skies flights lifted from O'Hare. On board, flight attendants carried new tablets synced to the medical alert system, a small blue pulse glowing on every screen. For Captain Nathaniel Brooks, it wasn't just another takeoff. It was proof that change could fly. In the cockpit of Flight 421 to Seattle, Brooks ran his checks with quiet precision. His daughter, Aisha Okafor, sat in first class, reading beside the window. 6 months earlier, she'd nearly died on a plane. Now she was flying again, by choice, not fear. "Ready for departure," the co-pilot said. Brooks smiled faintly. "Let's give them a flight they'll remember for the right reasons." Down the aisle, Miguel Alvarez, now wearing a lead safety instructor badge, adjusted his tie. He had frozen that day during Aisha's attack. The guilt had never left him. But now, every procedure, every question to passengers felt like redemption. In row 14, a young boy with a portable oxygen machine sat with his mother. Miguel knelt beside them. "Just checking your medical alert link, it's showing green on our system." The mother smiled. "First airline that's ever asked." Miguel returned it. "We don't forget our lessons here." Back at headquarters, Evelyn Pratt watched the flight data stream across massive monitors. Jewel Park hovered near her desk, running diagnostics. "Stable vitals, 0 errors," he said. Evelyn exhaled. "Let's hope it stays that way." Across the city, Clara Whitman walked into a community college classroom. She had volunteered for an ethics seminar, hoping to listen, not speak. The guest lecturer arrived moments later, and it was Brooks. Her breath caught. She stayed seated in the back row, heart pounding. Brooks began. "In aviation, we calculate everything: fuel, altitude, weight, but rarely do we calculate humanity. Procedure saves lives, but empathy prevents tragedy." A student raised her hand. "What about people who made terrible mistakes? Do they still belong here?" Brooks paused. "Failure teaches faster than success, but only if you stay long enough to learn." His gaze found Clara's. Instead of anger, his eyes carried recognition and quiet understanding. She looked down, fighting tears. Later, Aisha texted her father from the cabin. "Proud of you, Dad. You turned it all around." He replied from the cockpit. "No, sweetheart, you did. You gave it meaning." When Flight 421 landed in Seattle, reporters crowded the gate. Cameras rolled as the passengers exited. The boy with the oxygen tank grinned. "They already knew about my condition before I told them," he said. "It's the safest I've ever felt on a plane." Across town, Clara stood outside after the seminar, cold wind brushing her hair. For the first time in months, she didn't hide from her reflection in the glass door. "You can't rewrite the past," she whispered. "But you can fly differently next time." At the same moment, Aisha looked out her hotel window in Seattle. Planes crossed the dusk sky, bright trails fading into violet clouds. Her inhaler sat quietly on the table beside her. The news that night read, "Safe Skies takes off, from tragedy to transformation." Brooks, watching from his hotel room, turned off the television and closed his eyes. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Outside, another jet soared through the winter dark, engines humming like a heartbeat. For every passenger aboard, it carried the same unspoken promise. No one would ever be left struggling for breath again. The morning after Sky Bridge's first Safe Skies flight, the world's headlines were unanimous. From scandal to standard, Skybridge sets new aviation benchmark. The airline that had once been synonymous with discrimination was now rewriting the rules of flight safety. But for Captain Nathaniel Brooks, reform was never a finish line. It was maintenance work for the soul. In a quiet corner of O'Hare's terminal, Brooks met with Evelyn Pratt, Jules Park, and a visiting FAA compliance officer. The medical alert system had passed its initial tests, but expansion brought new challenges. "We've got interest from 5 other carriers," Jules said, tapping his tablet. "American, United, even a European budget line wants our framework." "Let them have it," Brooks said. "Saving lives isn't proprietary." The FAA officer nodded. "Impressive work, Captain. But your success has drawn scrutiny, too. A congressional committee wants testimony, public hearing next month." Evelyn looked up sharply. "They'll want Aisha there, won't they?" Brooks's jaw tightened. "She's been through enough." "She's also the reason this exists," Evelyn said softly. Meanwhile, across town, Aisha Okafor sat in her chemistry class at Northwood High, half listening as her teacher lectured. Her phone buzzed with another interview request. She ignored it. Ever since the press had dubbed her the girl who changed the skies, attention followed her everywhere. Some classmates admired her. Others whispered that her father's power made her untouchable. At lunch, her best friend Maya Lee slid into the seat beside her. "You're trending again. The FAA's hearing, people are saying you might testify." Aisha frowned. "Dad doesn't want me to." "Maybe it's not about what he wants," Maya said. "Maybe it's about who still needs to hear you." That night, Brooks drove home through sleet, wipers beating against the windshield. His phone rang. It was Clara Whitman. He hesitated, then answered. "Captain Brooks," she began, voice unsteady. "I wanted to thank you for letting me attend your ethics talk. I've started working toward my EMT certification. I thought maybe I could still help people." Brooks was silent for a moment. "Good," he said finally. "Help them before they need saving." The next day, Aisha came into his office carrying a printed letter. "Dad, I want to testify." He looked up from his desk. "You don't owe anyone that." "I know. But this isn't about owing, it's about owning what happened. If I tell my story, maybe someone else won't have to live it." He saw in her the same determination that once pushed him through flight school. Pride and fear collided in his chest. "If you're sure, I'll be there with you," he said quietly. 2 weeks later, Skybridge headquarters buzzed with preparation. Jules finalized data packets for the committee. Evelyn rehearsed her talking points on ADA reform. Clara sent a short email to Aisha. "I'll be watching. Thank you for forgiving what I couldn't fix." The day before the hearing, Brooks took Aisha to the observation deck at O'Hare. Planes climbed into the sky, one after another, each trailing white ribbons against the gray clouds. "You changed more than an airline," he said. "You reminded people what duty looks like." Aisha smiled faintly. "Duty and forgiveness. 2 things that keep us breathing." Below them, another Skybridge jet accelerated down the runway. Its blue tail shimmered under winter light, carrying passengers who would never know their safety began with a 16-year-old girl who refused to stay silent. Brooks watched it lift smoothly into the air, engines humming like a heartbeat. "Let's make sure," he murmured, "that the next story told about us isn't about a mistake, but a movement." And for the first time in months, Aisha's laughter rose above the sound of the departing planes, clear and certain as a new beginning. The congressional hearing drew cameras from every major network. The title projected on the marble wall read, "Aviation Accountability and Passenger Rights." Inside the packed chamber, the air buzzed with tension, curiosity, and a hint of awe. At the center sat Aisha Okafor, 16, calm but pale, her hands folded on the table. Beside her was Captain Nathaniel Brooks, uniform pressed, posture unshakable. Senator Elaine Porter, chair of the Transportation Committee, leaned toward the microphone. "Miss Okafor, the nation followed your story. You've become the face of reform. Can you tell us in your own words what you want this country to learn?" Aisha took a slow breath. "I want people to understand that respect shouldn't depend on how you look or what seat you're sitting in. I didn't survive because of luck. I survived because someone finally listened. I don't want the next passenger to have to wait that long." Her voice was steady, quiet, but every word landed like a verdict. Brooks glanced at her, pride and pain battling behind his calm expression. Senator Porter nodded, and Captain Brooks, as an executive within Skybridge Airways, what changes have been made since the incident? Brooks explained the Safe Skies initiative, the medical alert technology, and the new mandatory training for all crew. Every employee now learns how to identify medical distress, but more importantly, how to treat every human being as worth the pause it takes to ask what's wrong. Murmurs rippled through the room. One senator asked about costs. Brooks's response was sharp. The cost of prevention is nothing compared to the cost of regret. Outside the chamber, Evelyn Pratt coordinated media lines, whispering updates into her headset. "Stay focused on policy, not emotion," she reminded reporters. But emotion was what everyone came for. Watching from the gallery was Clara Whitman. She wore a plain gray coat, hair pinned back, eyes rimmed with nerves. She hadn't planned to come, but she needed to see it through. When Aisha mentioned forgiveness, Clara's throat tightened. "I forgave her," Aisha continued, "not because what she did was small, but because carrying anger was heavier than my asthma ever was. My dad always says forgiveness clears the air. I think he's right." The room went completely silent. Even the senator's gavel paused mid-air. Clara covered her mouth, tears sliding quietly down her face. Later, during recess, Brooks approached her in the hallway. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Clara whispered, "She's remarkable." He nodded. "So is what you're doing?" "Keep rebuilding." She exhaled shakily. "Thank you for not making me disappear." "People only disappear when they stop trying to make things right," Brooks said before returning to the chamber. That night, every news channel replayed Aisha's testimony. Headlines read, "Teen Survivor Redefines Justice in Aviation." The footage showed her finishing her statement, hands clasped, voice soft but resolute. "I was silenced once. I'll never be silent again." At home, Aisha watched the coverage beside her father. "Was I too serious?" she asked. Brooks smiled faintly. "You were perfect. You told the truth, and the truth always sounds serious." Meanwhile, at Skybridge headquarters, Jules Park uploaded the open-source version of the medical alert code for global airlines to use. His message read, "Technology is only powerful when shared." In a quiet living room across town, Clara turned off the TV. She sat in darkness, then opened her laptop and enrolled in her first EMT night course. Her new beginning, at last, had a heartbeat. Outside, snow fell over Washington, D.C., dusting the Capitol steps like quiet applause. And as Aisha drifted to sleep, her story no longer belonged to tragedy. It belonged to transformation. The months following the hearing transformed Skybridge from a scandal to a symbol. Every major airline adopted the medical alert program within 90 days. The FAA credited the initiative for cutting in-flight medical incidents by half. For Captain Nathaniel Brooks, the statistics were gratifying, but the real change lived inside people, their choices, their tone, their pause before judgment. At Skybridge headquarters, Brooks walked through the training center where new recruits practiced emergency drills. Screens displayed the words empathy, awareness, action. In one corner, Miguel Alvarez supervised a class on passenger communication. "Listen before you assume," Miguel told the trainees. "A question can save more lives than a command." Brooks lingered at the doorway, pride stirring quietly. After class, Miguel approached him. Hard to believe this started with one mistake. Brooks nodded. Mistakes are just lessons that refuse to whisper. Meanwhile, Aisha Okafor had become a reluctant celebrity. Her congressional testimony was now part of diversity and ethics courses across universities. Yet fame never sat comfortably on her shoulders. At school, she still preferred the back row, headphones, and silence. One afternoon, Maya Lee burst into the cafeteria waving her phone. "Aisha, did you see this? The United Nations wants you to speak at their youth summit on equality and technology." Aisha blinked. "The United Nations?" Maya grinned. "Yeah, looks like the world's bigger than first class." That night, Aisha told her father. Brooks listened, a proud smile tugging at his lips. "You've already changed one industry," he said. "Maybe it's time to teach the world how to breathe." Across the city, Clara Whitman completed her first EMT certification exam. Her trembling hands steadied as she signed her name on the final sheet. She had spent months rebuilding her life, nights studying, weekends volunteering. Each emergency she responded to reminded her of that single moment she had failed to act. Now, every saved life felt like a repayment. When her results arrived, passed with distinction, she cried quietly in the hallway of the training center. Then she sent a simple text to Brooks. "Thank you for believing people can change." He never replied, but she didn't need him to. At Skybridge's annual conference, Brooks took the stage before thousands of employees. Behind him, the massive screen displayed the new company motto, "One sky, one standard, one heart." He spoke plainly. "We rebuilt trust not through branding, but through choices. Policy means nothing without empathy, and empathy means nothing without accountability. Every one of you carries the power to make a difference, or to destroy one." The audience stood and applauded. Cameras flashed. Miguel caught sight of Brooks's daughter at the edge of the crowd, smiling proudly. Afterward, reporters asked Aisha if she still planned to fly commercially. She nodded. "Flying doesn't scare me anymore," she said. "Silence does." That evening, as the sun dropped over Lake Michigan, Brooks walked along the runway observation path. Jets rose one after another, their trails glowing against a golden sky. He thought of Clara studying in classrooms, Miguel teaching, Aisha preparing to address the UN. The circle of consequence had become a circle of growth. He pulled out his phone and opened an email draft to his staff. "Remember, procedures protect safety, but empathy protects souls. He smiled, deleted the draft, and decided it didn't need sending. They already knew. Above him, a Skybridge jet climbed into the fading light, engines whispering like a promise. The airline had found its second wind, carried not by reputation, but by the quiet revolution born from one girl's breath. 6 months after the congressional hearing, Skybridge Airways had become the global model for corporate reform. The Safe Skies initiative was now standard across 3 continents, and the Medical Alert app had saved multiple passengers mid-flight. Yet for Captain Nathaniel Brooks, success didn't feel like celebration. It felt like obligation, renewed every day. On a spring morning, he stood at a podium inside the Smithsonian's Aviation Hall. Journalists, executives, and students filled the seats. Behind him, a gleaming Skybridge plaque read, "From Mistake to Movement." "This isn't about one airline," Brooks began. "It's about every person who forgot that procedure means nothing without empathy. We changed because one 16-year-old girl reminded us what humanity costs." Applause filled the space. In the front row sat Aisha Okafor, now 17, poised and thoughtful. Next to her, Maya Lee recorded the speech for Aisha's growing online community of young activists. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed them. "Aisha, how does it feel to be the youngest reform advocate in aviation history?" one asked. Aisha smiled gently. "I don't want to be remembered for what went wrong. I want to be remembered for what changed after." Across the room, Evelyn Pratt coordinated the next phase of the project, integrating Medical Alert into global flight tracking systems. "We're merging compassion with technology," she told investors. "It's not just business, it's legacy." Meanwhile, in a modest emergency clinic near O'Hare, Clara Whitman finished her first official shift as an EMT. Sweat streaked her temples, but satisfaction anchored her. When the dispatcher called in a panic attack case on a domestic flight, Clara volunteered. Her team stabilized the passenger within minutes. For the first time in years, she felt she'd earned her uniform. That evening, she sent Aisha a short message. "Every time I help someone breathe easier, I think of you. Thank you." Aisha read it in the car as her father drove through Washington traffic. She didn't reply immediately, just smiled faintly, turning the phone screen toward him. Brooks nodded once. "Sometimes the best apology is a new beginning," he said. Later that week, Skybridge hosted a live demonstration for world regulators. Jules Park presented the updated Medical Alert system, now connected to biometric sensors in cabin air filters, able to detect carbon or oxygen fluctuations. "This is the future of responsive aviation," he said proudly. After the demo, Miguel Alvarez approached Aisha. "You ever think you'd start a revolution before finishing high school?" She laughed softly. "I didn't start it. I just made people look up." That night, the Brooks family attended a private dinner celebrating the UN Partnership on Equality in Transportation. Aisha, seated beside ambassadors, shared stories from students worldwide who'd faced discrimination in travel. Her voice was steady, her conviction clear. "Flying should feel safe," she said, "for everyone, no matter their seat, skin, or story." Brooks watched her, pride tightening his throat. The applause that followed was thunderous, but he didn't hear it. All he saw was the girl who'd once gasped for breath, now teaching the world to inhale without fear. Outside, rain streaked the city windows. Clara walked home from her shift, the sound of sirens fading into night. Across the sky, a Skybridge plane passed overhead, lights blinking like a heartbeat against the clouds. She stopped, tilted her head, and whispered to no one, "We did it." Back in Washington, Aisha stood on the hotel balcony with her father. Below them, the Capitol glowed. "Dad," she said quietly, "I used to hate flying." He smiled. "Now you give the sky meaning." High above, another aircraft sliced through the clouds, its path clear, its passengers unaware they were part of a legacy born from one girl, one breath, and a single moment of courage that refused to die. A full year had passed since Flight 921. The world had changed, and so had everyone connected to it. At Skybridge headquarters, banners marked the anniversary of Safe Skies, celebrating 12 months without a single major in-flight medical dispute. Cameras flashed, executives applauded. But for Captain Nathaniel Brooks, numbers weren't the victory. People were. He stood beside a display case holding the first medical alert prototype. "We built this from a mistake," he said to the crowd. "But mistakes only matter if we outgrow them." Applause echoed through the atrium. In the front row, Aisha Okafor, now beginning her freshman year at MIT, smiled proudly. She was studying aerospace engineering, inspired by her father, but determined to carve her own path. After the ceremony, Evelyn Pratt joined them. "Aisha, the FAA approved the global rollout. You'll see medical alert icons on every U.S. carrier by summer." "That's amazing," Aisha said. "It feels bigger than just us now." Brooks nodded. "It should be." Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of O'Hare's Emergency Training Center, Clara Whitman led a group of new EMT recruits through a breathing crisis simulation. Her calm voice guided them step by step. "Don't rush," she reminded. "Patients trust tone before they trust touch." The trainees listened closely. When the drill ended, one young medic asked, "Were you ever scared you couldn't fix something?" Clara smiled sadly. "Once. I learned the only real failure is not trying again." Her phone buzzed later that day, an invitation to attend Skybridge's anniversary gala. She hesitated, but eventually typed, "Yes." That evening, the gala ballroom shimmered under crystal lights. Former critics, officials, and staff gathered to celebrate the transformation. Jules Park received an Innovation Award for his work on biometric integration. Miguel Alvarez, now Director of Cabin Safety, toasted the team. "Here's to the crew who turned a crisis into culture," he said. When Clara entered, quiet murmurs rippled through the crowd. Brooks noticed first. He approached her slowly, extending his hand. "It's good to see you, Clara." She blinked, surprised. "You're not angry?" "Anger built walls," he said. "We decided to build bridges." As the orchestra played, Aisha joined them, elegant and composed in a simple navy dress. "Hi, Ms. Whitman," she said softly. "You look well." Clara's throat tightened. "You're even braver than I remember?" Aisha smiled. "You helped me learn how important listening is." Later that night, Brooks took the stage for closing remarks. 1 year ago, this airline faced its hardest truth. We learned that accountability isn't a punishment. It's a promise. Safe Skies isn't about perfection, it's about humility in motion. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, but the applause belonged to more than the company. It belonged to the lesson that had reshaped them all. Afterward, Clara stood by the balcony, watching the city lights reflect on the lake. Aisha approached and offered a quiet smile. "You coming back to work?" Clara shook her head. "No. I belong where I can help faster. Ambulances beat airplanes for that." They both laughed softly. When the night ended, Brooks looked around the ballroom, the people, the warmth, the quiet peace that came after a storm. He exhaled deeply. For the first time, his heart felt light. Outside, another Skybridge jet rose into the sky, its tail painted with a single phrase in soft blue letters. Every breath matters. Aisha looked up, her hand resting on her father's arm. "Think she would have believed we'd come this far?" she asked. Brooks smiled. "She helped us get here." Together, they watched the plane disappear into the night, a symbol of mistakes forgiven, lessons kept, and skies finally made safe. 6 months after the Skybridge anniversary, spring arrived early in Chicago. The air felt lighter, as if the city itself had exhaled. Across the skyline, billboards carried the company's new slogan, "Every breath matters." It had become more than branding. It was a vow. At MIT, Aisha Okafor stood before a packed auditorium giving her first guest lecture. The topic, Human-Centered Engineering in Aviation. Slides behind her showed diagrams of aircraft cabins redesigned for accessibility and biometric safety. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had lived the lesson she now taught. "When we talk about progress," she said, "we usually mean speed or profit. But real progress is empathy in action, the technology that remembers people first." The audience erupted in applause. Her professor later whispered, "You're not just studying aerospace, Aisha, you're redefining it." After class, she stepped outside into warm sunlight and called her father. "Guess what, Dad? My research group just got a grant from NASA to study inclusive aircraft design." Brooks's laugh rumbled through the phone. "I told them they should have hired you already." That evening, in his Chicago office, Captain Nathaniel Brooks reviewed reports from Skybridge's humanitarian division, airlifts that use the medical alert system for disaster relief. "We've come a long way," he told Evelyn Pratt, who sat across the desk. She nodded. "And we're not done. The UN wants you and Aisha to keynote their Global Safety Summit next quarter." Brooks smiled. "Looks like my kid's teaching the world to fly responsibly." Across the city, Clara Whitman finished her shift at the emergency clinic. She'd become one of Chicago's most trusted EMTs, her reputation rebuilt one call at a time. Tonight's patient was a little girl with severe asthma. As Clara knelt beside her, offering oxygen, the child's terrified mother whispered, "Is she going to be okay?" Clara smiled gently. "She's going to breathe. I promise." Later, as the ambulance doors closed, she looked up to see a plane gliding across the night sky, its tail glowing blue, the words, "Every breath matters," shimmering against the clouds. For the first time, she felt peace, knowing she had finally become part of the solution. Meanwhile, at Skybridge headquarters, Jules Park unveiled the next phase of innovation, BioLink, a partnership between airlines and hospitals allowing real-time medical coordination mid-flight. Reporters filled the room. "Technology is empathy at scale," Jules said. "We're just building the tools." Brooks attended quietly from the back. He no longer needed to lead every moment. Leadership had spread beyond him into hands that understood the purpose. That weekend, father and daughter flew together again, Aisha in seat 2A, Brooks in the cockpit jump seat. The crew greeted them warmly, the medical alert interface glowing softly beside the pilot's console. As they lifted through sunset, light filled the cabin like gold dust. Aisha turned toward the window, watching the clouds drift beneath them. "You know," she said through her headset, "I used to think flying was dangerous." Brooks smiled. "It always is. The point isn't to erase the risk. It's to meet it with care." They landed in New York that night for a televised interview. Under studio lights, Aisha closed the segment with words that silenced the audience. My story began with fear, she said, but it ends with hope. Because every breath we save becomes a story worth telling. When the cameras went dark, Brooks embraced his daughter. "You've done more than I ever could," he whispered. She smiled. "No, Dad. We did this together." Outside, the city lights flickered across the Hudson. Another Sky Bridge jet ascended through the clouds, its engines steady, its passengers unaware that their safety existed because one young girl had refused to stay quiet. And beneath that endless sky, Aisha whispered the truth that had carried her this far. Justice doesn't end in punishment. It begins in change.